Okay. Hi, folks, and welcome to Mohonk Consultations webinar from farm fields to riverfronts, nature-based solutions to climate change. My name is Brad, and I'm on the board of directors of Mohonk Consultations. So Mohonk Consultations is a nonprofit organization founded in 1980 and based at the Mohonk Mountain House in New Paltz, New York. Yet we are a separate and discrete entity from the Mountain House, though we do get some support from the Mountain House and the Smiley family who own it. The purpose of Mohonk Consultations is to help bring about a clearer understanding of the interrelationship of all life on Earth, emphasizing the need for sustainable use of all the Earth's resources, including the human community, and to support the development of practical means to do so. We accomplish this by organizing full-day conferences, afternoon forums, annual Distinguished Achievement Awards, and publications, all of which are centered on the Hudson Valley, yet attuned to national and global perspectives as well. Convening at the Mohonk Mountain House, attendees listen, share, brainstorm, and create grassroots initiatives that turn ideas into action for the common good. I realize that a lot of people may not be aware of Mohonk Consultations, and that is probably because our program topics vary really widely each year. And while we may not seem to have a particular focus, we actually do. And it's in our motto, which is, let's talk it over at Mohonk. So Consultations values and engages in collaborative efforts to build stronger communities with resilient and sustainable systems. We are proud to carry on the legacy of Mohonk's tradition of creating opportunities for meaningful and productive exchange of ideas. One of the earliest examples, and my favorite, are the International Arbitration Conferences, which were held from 1896 to 1915 at the Mountain House. And it was the first time in history that people from various walks of life around the world got together to try to solve major issues. In this case, it was to try to prevent the outbreak of war. There were people from government, education, business, and religious and spiritual groups. And this model of convening, this model, led to the development of similar models, which then evolved into the creation of the UN. That was a long time ago. And in recent years, we've had programs addressing listening to Black farmers, finding common ground while overcoming polarization, nature across boundaries, keeping lands and water connected, renewable energy, confronting the waste crisis with Judith Enck talking about plastics, protecting water resources in the era of climate change, creating and sustaining peace, supporting farmers and farm workers, and addressing hunger in the Hudson Valley. Some of the outcomes from our programs over the years include we played a key role in the formation of the Phillies Bridge Farm Project. And also some of our conferences led to the formation of the Hudson River Watershed Alliance, as well as the expansion of the food pantry system in the Kingston, New York area, especially due to increased gleaning of food at local farms. And since today's program is about the health of the earth on which we live, please know that Mohonk Consultations acknowledges with respect and gratitude that the land on which we live and the land that sustains us is on what indigenous people have called Turtle Island, which is commonly referred to now as North America. And we are in the Mahicantuck Valley. Mahicantuck means the river that flows both ways, and probably you all know that's because it's tidal. So the first people who lived here were the Sopis and Minisink peoples of the Lenni Lenape and Delaware nations. So today, this webinar will address what may be the most critical issue for our planet, climate change, and some of the things that we can do about it. Of course, there are other incredibly critical issues such as food insecurity, COVID, economic insecurity, war, and a serious inability to resolve differences via compromise, cooperation, and sharing. For that, goodwill is needed, but maybe that's another program later. So I assume you folks are basically here today because you know about the impact of climate change and are motivated to find solutions. I hope our three excellent speakers will provide you with useful solution-oriented ideas and inspiration to carry on the good work. So by utilizing techniques for regenerative agriculture, we can work proactively with the carbon cycle to keep CO2 in the earth rather than in the atmosphere. And by adapting to the threat of flooding in the Hudson River Valley, we can address what is said to be the biggest climate change threat to this region, flooding. So our program this evening is being done in conjunction with Bard College's worldwide teaching on climate change and justice. So it's possible that folks somewhere else far away on the planet might be tuning in. So today, each speaker will talk for about 15 minutes, and there will be some time for questions and answers after all of the speakers have finished speaking. And you will be able to type in a question in the Q&A box near the bottom of your screen, but your audio is muted and your video is off, and there also won't be a chat box during the webinar. However, we are recording this, and so you'll be able to see it or share it with others on our website soon. And the webinar will end about 8:15. So before we get to the speakers, I would like to say thanks so much to our program coordinator, Kim Stieber, who is invisibly working behind the scenes to manage the broadcast of the webinar. And also thanks to Mohonk Consultations board members, Kara Lee and Louisa Finn, who helped plan this event. And when we get to the Q&A, it'll be Louisa who will read the questions. Okay. So I'll introduce all three speakers and then they can get going. First up is Heather Eckhart. Heather is the manager of Scenic Hudson's Northeast Carbon Alliance project, and she will present an overview of the carbon cycle and discuss how regenerative agriculture can help mitigate climate change while improving agricultural soils. Then Aaron Risto of American Farmland Trust will speak, and he is the director of the Genesee River Demonstration Farm Network and of the New York State Rented Lands Conservation Initiatives Program. Aaron will share examples of regenerative agriculture underway in our region. And then Lyndsey Cooper is up, and she is a climate outreach specialist at the state's DEC, Hudson River Estuary Program, and the Cornell University Water Resources Institute. Lyndsey will describe climate adaptation and resilience programs in Hudson Valley riverfront communities, including a case study of local community climate adaptive design, which is done in partnership with Cornell's Department of Landscape Agriculture. Okay, we're ready to go. So Heather, it's all yours.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Brad, and thank you also to Louisa and to Kara. I also wanted to just generally thank Mohonk Consultations for inviting me to give this presentation, and thanks to everybody in the audience for attending. I'm going to share my screen now. Bear with me for a moment. Okay, hopefully everybody can see that. Okay. So I'm Heather Eckhart, and I'm the Northeast Carbon Alliance Project Manager. The Northeast Carbon Alliance, otherwise known as Nika, was founded in 2019 by Scenic Hudson's president, Ned Sullivan, and other partners in the Northeast region. Nika was formed to accelerate, Nika was formed to accelerate the implementation of regenerative practices to help combat climate change in 4 key focus areas spanning from mountaintop to ocean floor. These areas are regenerative agriculture, sustainable forestry, aquatic systems, and public policy. Nika's researchers and land managers aim to inform public policies that support, promote, and provide incentives for implementing climate resilient regenerative practices at the state, regional, and national levels. And a little background on me, the story of how I became Nika's project manager is quite serendipitous. I've honestly never understood the separation between people and nature, and I knew I wanted to play some part in bridging that gap. So I was really excited when I was hired by Scenic Hudson as an executive assistant back in 2017. Scenic Hudson is an organization that brings people and nature together through the creation of parks and much more to provide a healthy, sustainable environment for all to live, work, and play in the Hudson Valley and beyond. Due to my personal interest in medicinal plants and better land use methods, I earned a degree in agricultural science before working at Scenic Hudson. When I accompanied Ned to the original meeting of researchers and farmers that would later become Nika, I was there to take meeting notes. But when Ned saw my passion and comprehension of the topics, I continued to work with him on this important initiative, managing the operations of the Alliance and helping it to grow. I was excited to hear the presentations made there at that first meeting that was originally attended by about 35 accomplished scientists, land managers, and policy professionals. That meeting sparked a collaborative spirit and enthusiasm that now includes members from more than 40 institutions and nearly 300 individuals. We have held meetings biannually at a minimum since then, both in person and virtually. Partner institutions, including Hudson Carbon in Columbia County, Duke Farms in New Jersey, and Stone Barn Center for Food and Agriculture in Tarrytown, New York, have graciously hosted meetings showcasing their great work and helping to facilitate Nika's mission. We have also hosted several virtual meetings covering forestry in the Northeast, carbon dynamics in the Hudson River, and important policy initiatives. So you might be asking why we're working in so many different areas. Well, simply because it's important, because everything is interconnected. Our health and the health of the planet depend on each other. I really like this quote from a Sand County Almanac that I feel makes this point really well. The trend of the evidence indicates that in land, just as in the human body, the symptoms may lie in one organ and the cause in another. This quote makes the connection that people and the environment are not separate, and reminds us that what we do and observe in one place will affect and manifest in another. For instance, when we pollute water upstream, the flow carries the contaminants downstream. When we use broad spectrum pesticides and herbicides to kill unwanted organisms, we also kill beneficial ones, including essential pollinators. When we destroy forests and damage soils, the stored carbon gets released in the atmosphere, increasing warming, and the organic matter gets depleted, impeding our ability to grow food. The carbon cycle is an important biogeochemical cycle that sustains life. I chose this graphic because it shows the interconnectedness of living things, but also the significance of the air, oceans, land, and human activities on this cycle. Carbon is constantly cycling between the earth and the atmosphere. Depending on where carbon is in this cycle, it is either a source, releasing carbon from the terrestrial biosphere, or a sink, sequestering and storing carbon from the atmosphere. When in the atmosphere, carbon atoms attach to oxygen atoms to form carbon dioxide, a potent greenhouse gas. Greenhouse gases such as carbon dioxide trap heat in the atmosphere. These gases form a greenhouse effect, which, when balanced, is necessary to keep our planet habitable. However, the amount of carbon in the atmosphere has been increasing rapidly over the past century. The increase is largely a result of human activities, such as through the burning of fossil fuels and deforestation. Although about half of the carbon emissions are being absorbed by the ocean and land, it is not happening quickly enough or without consequence. For example, when we destroy forests, we're not only releasing stored carbon, but we're also destroying an important carbon sink as well. As the ocean takes in more carbon, it becomes more acidic, threatening marine life. The ocean also absorbs about 90% of the heat trapped by greenhouse gases, which is causing it to warm as well. But fortunately, care for these natural systems can help to balance the carbon cycle. We've learned that what's good for biodiversity is also good for climate. Through photosynthesis, plants and microorganisms take in carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and store carbon in their stems and roots, and also in soil. Protecting and nurturing natural carbon sinks, such as forests, soils, wetlands, and the ocean, can help to offset increases in atmospheric carbon that come from widespread use of fossil fuels. So one thing that can help is regenerative agriculture. Historical land use and intensive agriculture with poor soil management have led to a worldwide loss of organic matter in agricultural soils, leading to less resilient fields that are subject to the consequences of floods and droughts, including erosion, sediment, and nutrient runoff. To help with this, Nika farmers have implemented regenerative practices on their farms. Regenerative practices such as the use of diverse crop rotations, cover crops, reduced tillage, and compost all enrich soil, enhance biodiversity, restore ecosystems, and capture carbon in soil. Using cover crops reduces erosion and moves carbon deeper into the soil through their root systems while breaking up compacted soil. This reduces the need for excessive tillage, which can harm soil structure and lead to chronic compaction. Crop diversity helps naturally with pests, and compost provides carbon-rich material that improves soil health. Nika research farms have begun sharing and gathering their collective data on a common ArcGIS platform to compare different methodologies and verify their carbon sequestration and storage based on different regenerative practices. Quantifying this data has challenges, as many factors including soil type, vegetation, moisture, and landscape all impact carbon capture in soils. Collecting regional data will be useful to potentially inform best practices at a policy level, with the goal of policies and financial incentives based on sound science that will reward land managers of all scales for implementing practices proven to achieve targeted levels of greenhouse gas sequestration and also additional co-benefits such as enhanced water quality, flood mitigation, and biodiversity. On the right side of this slide are photos that I have taken at partner farms. On the lower right is a photo of a sophisticated piece of equipment called an Eddy covariance analyzer. This equipment measures carbon flux between the ground and the air over a field, allowing researchers to accurately measure carbon exchange in a given area. Forests are another important carbon sink, with both trees and soil sequestering and storing vast amounts of carbon, reducing greenhouse gas emissions from the atmosphere. More than 70 million of the 766 million acres of United States forest land are in northeastern states. Nika is working with Scenic Hudson's science team and other partners to develop a forestry working group that will investigate threats that northeastern forests are facing, such as increased deer herbivory. Between hunting programs and protecting native carnivores, such as coyotes and bobcats, and their habitat connectivity, we can ensure that white-tailed deer populations will be kept in check. Reducing herbivory and controlling invasive species will ensure that forests have the ability to regenerate and continue sequestering and storing carbon. Another important carbon sink is the ocean. The ocean takes up to 1/3 of the carbon emitted by human activity. Carbon is also sequestered by coastal ecosystems, including mangroves, seagrasses, and salt marshes. This is also known as blue carbon. Nika's water working group is studying carbon dynamics and nutrient inputs in wetlands, tributaries, and the Hudson River. The health of these systems is crucial due to their ability to sequester and hold carbon, but also for the potential sources of carbon they could become when they're damaged. Non-point source pollution in waterways from industrial and agricultural runoff have brought to light the strong need for truly interdisciplinary research and funding to explore the complex biological, chemical, and physical processes that impede the health of waterways. And some very good news on the policy front. In December of 2021, New York State Governor Kathy Hochul signed the Soil Health and Climate Resiliency Act, which is a significant milestone in the state to move agriculture toward practices that will make farming part of the solution to global warming through soil management that addresses climate change and improves the productivity and profitability of agriculture at the same time. The Nika Policy Working Group is also setting priorities for the 2023 Farm Bill, focusing on the strengths of the Northeast region. Although not here, my colleague Andy Bicking, Scenic Hudson's Director of Government Relations and Public Policy, is the co-chair of Nika's policy committee. I will include his contact information for further questions about Nika's policy matters at the end of this presentation. And here we are at the end. So Nika is an important alliance that has the power and expertise to thrust the Northeast region into the spotlight of climate justice leadership, from mountaintop to ocean floor. Please visit our website to learn more and contact me with any questions. Thank you so much. And I will turn it over to Aaron.
Thanks, Heather.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Just give me 1 second to share my screen. Hopefully everyone can see me and hear me.
Yes, you're good to go.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yes, I also appreciate this opportunity to share a bit about the work that we are doing with American Farmland Trust. My name is Aaron Risto, and I am the Agricultural Stewardship Program Manager. I'm going to talk today about the Genesee River Demonstration Farm Network with the goals of promoting sound farming practices through on-farm field trials, case studies, and peer-to-peer learning. So a little background for the network. It's in Western New York. That's where the Genesee River is. And you can see it highlighted in yellow there. And we have 11 farms currently in the network. So these farms consist of 7 dairies. One of them is organic. We have 4 cash grain farms. And these 11 farms alone represent about almost 50,000 acres and 15,000 head of livestock. And so they are relatively big farms, but we chose them because they do have resources available to them that smaller farms tend to not have. So they have a lot of long-standing history, a lot of records, record keeping ability and sharing. They have been doing these practices for quite some time. And so, we are looking to diversify the type of farms that we have, but we are starting from this place, and so that's what we have. And one of the ideas is that since these farms have this history of doing soil regenerative practices, that we could have this bigger impact beyond this 50,000 acres. We want to accelerate adoption of soil regenerative practices. And we're doing that through a comprehensive evaluation and outreach effort using real farms, using on-farm demonstrations to provide other farmers who are curious about adoption and have not yet done that. We're providing them with information with using these farms as a foundation for that. So the Demo Farm Network was developed in 2018. And one of the key pieces of that is AFT, American Farmland Trust, serves as a coordinator for a lot of efforts in that region. So it's building and supporting partnerships with Cooperative Extension, Cornell University, soil and water conservation districts, other nonprofits, and ag consultants in the area that are working with farms. So we have, it helps to have this coordinated effort through this network. And like I said, we're learning from these local farmers that have a successful soil health implementation already. They have a lot to share from lessons learned over a decade or so of trying different things. One unique piece of our network is the focus on the economic benefits and costs, and that it's a real life experience, real life histories from these farms. And I'm going to talk about that in a second, the economics. But also anecdotally, these farms have things that we can't measure directly or model. You know, observations about their soil tilt changing, having more time to do other things on the farm that they didn't have before. And so we also are sharing those stories with other farmers. So these farms have learned to integrate these practices into their current system, and we're highlighting them to share these stories to inspire and support other farms who are interested in adopting soil regenerative practices. So these pictures are taken from all the farms. I'm sorry, all of these pictures are taken from some of the farms that are in the network, but all of the farms are doing all of these practices at least to some level. So they all have adopted, they all are doing cover crops on as many acres as they can. They are all practicing some form of reduced tillage. So this picture here in the center is strip till, because they're just tilling right where the seed's going to be planted while the rest stays undisturbed. They all are doing some sort of nutrient management, manure injection here. This is a manure injector that's putting those nutrients right into the soil and minimizing any loss to the atmosphere. Another practice that many of the farms in the network are doing is planting green, which again, I'll talk about more in a second, but it's the practice of planting the cash crop like corn or soybeans into a growing living cover crop. And you can see that up there in the right corner there where the one tractor is actually terminating the cover crop right before they're planting, right behind it with the tractor. And then a little bit later in the bottom left here, you can see what that looks like in the summer. There's a lot of that mulch there. There's a lot of nutrients and other benefits there that I'll talk about. And so we're sharing these pictures, we're sharing these stories, and we're quantifying the economics and environmental impacts of these practices on these farms. So just to talk a little bit more about that, a key piece of our outreach has been the development of these soil economic and environmental case studies. They are available online for free. And there's 4 for the Genesee River watershed so far, but we're gonna make 11 of them. We've just gotten 4 done so far. And this is part of a larger effort. So there's actually about 10 total across the country that if you were interested in looking at other farming systems, but we wanted them to be read. So we made, the goal here is to make them short and sweet. We put a lot of pictures in here. The front page focuses mostly on the background of the farm, the type of farm that they are, why they started on their journey, the kind of soil health practices that they've adopted. And then the back page goes into the analysis more, the economics of it, and also the environmental results that we have. And so what we have here is, this table here is called a partial budget, or we did a partial budget analysis. And so for both the economics and for the environmental modeling, what we did was we took a before scenario and an after scenario, and the before scenario is before they started adopting any practices. So whatever they were doing conventionally. So we had that scenario, and then we said, okay, they added cover crops, they added no-till, they improved their nutrient management. And so we looked at the cost of what it was before and the cost of what it was after. So for example, there might have been 4 passes that the farmer was doing before to prepare the bed, to get it ready to plant. And now they're just doing 1 pass at planting with a no-till system. And so there's going to be some significant savings there. On the other hand, they would be purchasing and planting cover crop seed, and that would have an additional cost. And so we're looking at, one thing decreases costs, something increases costs, and we're finding that balance. And overall, hoping to show that the scale is leaning towards profitability for the farm by adopting these practices. We also did that for the environmental modeling as well. So this was more of the economics was more of a whole farm or a large rotation, a large number of acres within a farm. The environmental modeling only allowed us to look at 1 field for either the water quality or greenhouse gas benefits. But in both cases, it was a before scenario versus an after a soil health adoption scenario. So just to look at a little bit closer. So again, I could give an entire presentation on just the economics piece, the methodology we used and the results from each farm. I don't have time for that tonight. So I'm just going to highlight a little bit of what this looks like up close. So Jay Swede here of Gary Swede Farms, he, like I said, he had an increase of net income because he reduced a lot of tillage passes. He also had he could document an increase in yields over time. And so that led to about a $71 per acre net income, but he did have costs. So he had to do an extra herbicide application in some cases, and he also had to buy cover crop seed and plant it and manage it. So there was a cost there of $16 per acre. So overall, though, he had an annual change positively for a $55 an acre net income, which was about a 345% return on investment. And so, he appreciated having this quantified, but also we are sharing these through the case studies, and then also through Jay himself will share this story and stand up in front of farmers and tell them about the benefits that he's seen. In terms of the environmental results, so again, we used 2 different modeling scenarios. So we had this water quality through the nutrient tracking tool. And so again, I did this for each farm, but I'm just, because of time, summarizing the 4 farms together. So the average field size was just about 20 acres, which isn't very big, but it's actually fairly common for New York. And overall, all 4 farms observed reduced soil and water runoff benefits. So you can see the numbers there. There was quite a bit of a range, but that did depend on basically the starting point. So some of the farms actually were already doing, even though they weren't doing what we would identify as soil health specifically practices, they were having good crop rotations. They were already doing fairly decent nutrient management, that sort of thing. So some of the farms had a little bit less of a drastic result, but nonetheless, that we all saw reductions in nutrient losses. And for the Comet Farm greenhouse gas emission modeling, we also saw that all 4 farms observed greater reductions of emissions by adopting these practices. So nearly 280% was the weighted average based on the field size. And about 4 cars were taken off of the field, taken off of the road annually. It's the equivalent of that for just that one 20-acre field. So it's not for the whole farm, for just one field was almost 4 cars on average. One thing that we do is definitely do a lot of outreach and education. One during COVID, when we couldn't have in-person meetings, we made an online video of basically what a field day would be like. And so we still prepared this treatment plot here with 15 different cover crop mixes. And for fun, we planted the same mix in these tubes that you can see here, these white PVC pipes placed in front of each treatment. And so it had the same mix in there. And then what we did was we took those tubes back to the lab at Cornell and rinsed out all the soil around the roots and then photographed them. And so you could see what the mixes were doing under the ground as well. And we inserted these photos with each mix in the video as they were being discussed. And this is important in a lot of ways. It's called a cover crop, but really most of the work is being done below ground. And this helps show that. Different cover crops provide different functions in terms of treating constraints that soil may have. So compaction might be an issue, or perhaps aggregate stability is an issue. So different cover crops would help with different alleviating different constraints. And so this can show visually like, hey, look, there's a lot going on underground here. Look at this. You can also see this is carbon being pulled out of the atmosphere and being put into the ground. And so that's another way to demonstrate it. And I have another way to show that is through, it reminded me of this slide, seeing that cover crop roots, because soil does store 2 to 3 times more carbon dioxide than in the atmosphere. We did see the carbon cycle a little earlier. I also have a little miniature version of that. And so, yeah, it's a sink and a source. But you could see like this perennial crop here, that mass of roots that can be produced. And that is pulling carbon out of the atmosphere and putting it into the ground. And so that's another visualization that we like to show in terms of those cover crop roots being rinsed. And overall, the philosophy here is, the NRCS has these 4 soil health principles and we like to focus and encourage our efforts on combining practices and building resilient systems. And you can see here, this is the relative soil organic carbon concentration in the soil over time. And the conventional system, you're losing that organic matter, but by combining practices, no-till alone, you're going to maybe level that off. Providing no-till with cover crops, you're going to get a little bit better, a little bit quicker. Combining with other technologies, in theory, you can not only get there at a higher level, but you can get there faster. And so one of those technologies, and I'm going to finish with this, is planting green, which I mentioned earlier. So cover cropping itself is innovative and has been encouraged. This is another step in the cover cropping genre, is that again, it's planting a cash crop into a living cover crop. And you can see this tractor here planting right into that cover as it's growing. And what this is doing beyond traditional cover crops is that we're delaying the termination of killing that cover until after this is planted or just right before. And that allows like maybe 10 to 15 days of that cover to grow. And it's in late April, early May when things are growing quite quickly. And so quite a bit more biomass is generated during that time. We are actually measuring that on replicated trials, but I, again, didn't have time to share that. But we're extending the cover crop growing season, providing extra biomass. So that's building organic matter more quickly at a higher level in most cases than traditional cover cropping. This mulch here that you see in the bottom corner, that helps, that's a lot extra mulch than it might be there with the normal cover crop situation. And that's suppressing late season weeds. So that helps economically with the farms, but it also does have an environmental benefit of not being out there with glyphosate, putting that onto the soil, minimizing the amount of times that needs to be done. There's also nitrogen in that mulch there, and there's extra nitrogen from the additional biomass from planting green. And again, that's reducing the source of nitrogen synthetically that needs to be applied and also has an economic benefit to the farm. It also facilitates earlier planting and manure application, especially in a very, very wet spring, so they can get on there and help improve their yields. However, additional equipment is needed to do this. You have to put different things on the tractor or the implement to make it work right. You can also plant it too densely, or maybe you don't get it terminated in time. Something comes up where you can't get out there and it gets out of control. So that could lead to poor crop emergence or growth. So there's still challenges to do it. And that's why not everyone's doing it. It's the learning curve, and there's some barriers to getting started. So just as an example of a benefit that I think this group would appreciate is this field here is a picture of corn flattened from a very intense rainstorm. It was about a 6-inch rain event, I think 2 seasons ago now. And so in just about 2 hours, there was about 6 inches of rain. And this field is actually no-tilled, so it had a very good practice. It was coming out of a alfalfa sod. So again, very good for soil health, but yet this still happened. This corn got flattened, and you can see pretty large area there. And also the soil is kind of sealed up and not looking great. But literally across the street, this farmer had planted green in the fall. So that's what they're planting into wheat there in the fall. And the photographer took that first picture that I showed you, the corn on the ground, turned around and took this picture on the other side of the road. And this is what it looks like across the road. So, this corn's looking great. That soil's looking healthy, and it's all still covered and protecting that soil and keeping it there in place. And the farmer's happy because their corn's still growing. So that's one reason why I'm focusing on planting green, and that's a practice that we're doing a lot of research on now currently. And we'll have some, we do have results, but I didn't have time to share. But that is my time, and I'm done with my presentation. So thank you very much. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Lyndsey Cooper.
Thanks, Aaron.
Everyone, just give me 1 second to share my screen. Okay. Hi, everyone. Can you all hear me and see me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. My name is Lyndsey Cooper. I am the Climate Outreach Specialist at the DEC Hudson River Estuary Program. We work in partnership with the Cornell Water Resources Institute, and I'm very excited to be here today to share more of our programs and also to learn from the other presenters about different adaptation strategies that are being done in the Hudson Valley. So today I'll just be taking you through a few different topics. First, I'll start off with a little bit of information about climate change in our region. We'll talk about the Climate Smart Communities program, and we'll also talk about Climate Adaptive Design Studio and the Flood Resilience Network. So the Hudson River Estuary program has been around for about 35 years. We are a non-regulatory part of the DEC. And we work to achieve a number of key benefits, all related to protecting and managing the Hudson River estuary, which ranges from the Verrazano Narrows in New York City up to Troy. And we have a number of teams who work on these listed benefits here, including robust fisheries and habitats, clean water. Our team specifically works on climate adaptive communities, and so on and so forth. This is our climate team. We're a small team of 3, and we serve the area that includes 267 municipalities across 10 counties. Jasenia Laureano is our planning specialist, and Libby Zamaitis is our climate change program coordinator, and I am our outreach specialist. So let's talk about climate change within our region. New York's climate is changing faster than the national and global averages, and there are certain trends that are happening within our region that can lead to different impacts. So some of the trends that are happening are increasing temperatures, changing precipitation patterns, and rising sea level. And these impacts can lead to heat waves, short-term drought, and flooding. So it's important for us to remember that climate is the long-term average of weather. So weather, I think this graphic does a way of putting it, has a great way of putting it really simply. So weather tells you what to wear each day, and climate tells you what types of clothes to have in your closet. And we've already seen a lot of the effects of climate change within the Hudson Valley. Hurricane Irene, Tropical Storm Lee, and Hurricane Sandy were all huge storm events that really had a huge impact in the Hudson Valley. In 2020, we had record heat, wildfire, and hurricane seasons, and the trend continued through 2021 with Hurricane Ida and other major storm events. And all 3 of these photos are from the Hudson Valley and were taken within the last few years. So it's important to note that adaptation is one strategy to take when it comes to addressing climate change, but there are other strategies. Today, I'll be talking about the difference between mitigation and adaptation. So mitigation is reducing the emissions of or stabilizing the levels of heat trapping gases in the atmosphere. Mitigation reduces the magnitude of climate change. So you can think of it as sort of going to the source and reducing the magnitude. And mitigation has global effects. Adaptation, on the other hand, is adjusting to the current and future effects of climate change. At this point, we are locked into certain effects. Whether we stopped emitting tomorrow, there are certain effects, especially flooding and sea level rise, that will continue. And adaptation is a way of addressing some of those effects. So it's reducing our vulnerability to climate change, and adaptation is done at a very local level. So nature is the true expression of resilience. When we talk about climate change, oftentimes you hear people mention resilience, which is really the ability to recover from disturbances. And nature has a way of being able to change and adapt to whichever disturbances arise. And it is a really amazing tool that we can use also to address some of the impacts of climate change. So I'm going to talk about a few programs. This is a New York State program, the Climate Smart Communities program, which is a New York State certification program that helps local governments take action to reduce greenhouse gases and to adapt to a changing climate. And this program offers free technical assistance and grants to municipalities in order to help them achieve some of their local adaptation goals. And it's a certification program similar to LEED certification, where communities can gain points for all of the different actions that they take. And the Hudson Valley is actually a leading region for the Climate Smart Communities program. Of our municipalities, 13% are certified, 47% are pledged. And of our counties, we have 50% of our counties certified and 70% pledged, which is pretty significant compared to the statewide numbers. So another part of the Climate Smart Communities program, there are 12 pledge elements. So that's 12 different categories within the program that include actions that communities can take. And pledge element 7 covers the climate adaptation and resilience actions. And our team leads the working group on pledge element 7 that covers these actions. So as you can see, This is quite a long list, but there are some actions in here related to nature-based solutions, including nature-based shoreline, green infrastructure, and others. And right now we're excited because we're working on an action on inclusive engagement. So communities that are making an effort to do inclusive engagement, to do DEIJ work, will be able to receive points for that within their certification program. And for municipalities who are interested in completing some of these actions, there is support through your local Cornell Cooperative Extension. So Cornell Cooperative Extensions, or CCEs, help municipalities with a number of different projects annually, including culvert management plans, flood guides, resilience into comprehensive planning, and more. And since 2018, they've completed 73 actions within 48 local governments. So if you're interested, I can send these links in the chat and you can learn more about how they do that and why. So the next program that I'm talking about is our Climate Adaptive Design, or CAD program. And the CAD Studio is a research effort led by Cornell professor Josh Serra, who is a professor in landscape architecture. And it's in partnership with the Hudson River Estuary program. And the studio links Cornell students in landscape architecture with flood risk Hudson riverfront communities to explore design alternatives and to start the conversation on what we can do and what communities want to do related to building a more connected and resilient waterfront. So we have completed 8 studio sites in 6 communities. Most recently, we just completed our 2021 studio in the city of Poughkeepsie. And we're very excited because right now applications are open. So we are accepting applications for municipalities to apply. And I will share more about that in just a few minutes. So a little bit more about the design process. It's split into 3 separate phases. So the intention of phase 1 is what I just described, where it's to start a conversation, it's to inspire adaptive thinking, not just within the students, but within community members as well. So students create designs, they get community feedback, and they show their designs off at multiple community events. And phase 2 is developing these designs further within the community to create feasible adaptation projects. So typically what happens is we create an RFP for design consultants to further develop the students' designs into an implementable, feasible project on the ground. And phase 3 is a future concept. So phase 3 would be implementing these designs, the final design, and the construction of an adaptation. So actually changing the waterfront. And you can see on the right here on this map, the top section is the studio phase 1s we've completed. The second section is phase 2, and there's also CAD lab, which is related but a bit separate. And throughout the CAD studio, there is a focus on using nature-based solutions and natural solutions. The students learn a lot about using nature-based solutions, and some of those include green infrastructure. So an example of that would be something like a permeable pavement, where when we do experience flooding and stormwater runoff, the green infrastructure is able to help filter and absorb the stormwater where it is. They learn about living shorelines and incorporate a lot of living shorelines, which can help to protect and stabilize the water's edge. And their living shorelines are made of natural materials like plants, rocks, sand. And some of the benefits are that they can be really cost efficient. They can create a habitat for native species, and they can do carbon sequestration, which Aaron and Heather both referenced in their presentations. And then there is also ecologically enhanced bulkheads and revetments. So this is another strategy to protect the shoreline, especially from the impacts of wave energy and of erosion. So I really wanted to include this. This was research done by one of our partner researchers at Cornell. Jack Zinda and his team sent out a survey to 499 households in Kingston and Troy. This was during the summer of 2020. And what they found, they asked the households about awareness of flooding and solutions. And what they found was that there was an overwhelming majority of support for green shorelines. So you can see here in the graph that most respondents strongly agreed or somewhat agreed that green shorelines were a good investment for municipalities to make to help protect the shoreline and to have some of those benefits for flooding. So with all of that said, if you're interested, if there are municipality representatives or anyone really, if you're interested, this would be something great to bring up to your municipality. We are having a pre-application webinar on Tuesday, April 5th from 1:30 to 3 p.m. And interested municipalities need to submit a letter of interest. You can submit it directly to me. My email address is here and I will also put it in the chat by Monday, May 2nd. And we have a lot of information on this on our website, so you can check that out as well. So the last thing I want to mention is that we have the Flood Resiliency Network, which is a group of 14 local governments. Our goal is to double that by 2025, so we would really love to welcome new members. And the purpose of this network is really to help connect municipalities in the Hudson Valley to learn about flooding, to share ideas, and to come up with solutions that work locally. And I will also send a link to that in the chat. So I just want to end on a positive note here, which is that each community in the Hudson Valley can build climate resilience into their future. One of the great things about adaptation is that it is so local, so that communities can really think about what it is that they need specifically in their region or in their area. And solutions are happening throughout the Hudson Valley. All three of these photos are from Long Dock Park in Beacon. And this is a park that was designed to be entirely floodable. And at this moment, there are a lot of great resources out there for communities to start thinking and doing these projects. So I will include some more of those resources in the chat. And thank you all so much for having me, and thank you for putting this together to Mohawk Consultations.
And thanks for speaking, Lyndsey. Okay, Louisa.
Hi, everyone. That was fascinating. Thanks, Aaron and Heather and Lyndsey. Learned a lot. And we have some questions rolling in from participants. So if you have a question burning, add it to the chat, the Q&A. First question is, I believe, for our first speaker, somebody's curious to know about, or to hear about how Nika's work relates to climate justice.
Yes, I'm sorry, I can answer that. Climate change impacts have different social, economic, and public health consequences, often having a disproportional effect on historically marginalized communities. Nika is prioritizing climate mitigation and resilience, hoping to ease climate change effects, and we're very supportive of organizations who are on the front lines of justice issues.
Okay, thanks, Heather. And next question, are any of the farms, I assume this is to Aaron, making use of biochar as a way to both sequester carbon and improve soil quality?
Yeah, so the quick answer is no, but the reason why is biochar is still a very new practice, and one of the challenges with biochar is that there's not a great way of distributing it yet. There hasn't been the markets developed, and so the few places that are there to make, that are making biochar are far away, and so it's very expensive to ship it. It's actually as much to ship it as it is just to buy the material. And then also we're talking about thousands of acres. For example, Gary Sweet Farm, Jay's farm, is 4,500 acres. Another farm we will have is 10,000 acres. And just the amount of biochar you need, would be very, very expensive to ship it and to apply it on the field at the scale that it would need to be done. So it's a developing technology. Someday perhaps it would be the cost would be down, or there would be subsidies of some type. But currently most farms aren't using these practices unless it's a very, very small scale because of affordability and access to it. It's not made in a lot of places yet.
Okay, thanks, Aaron. Somebody else is asking, I believe this would go to Lyndsey, if a municipality has participated in the CAD program before, are they eligible to apply again, or should applicants be new communities only?
We're currently accepting applications from all riverfront municipalities. So depending on the community and whether they've done phase 1 or 2, it may depend, but I would say submit an application, definitely.
And just some follow-up, thanks, Lyndsey. Thanks. Some follow-up about the biochar question. Somebody is saying they know of a local producer of biochar in the Hudson Valley. And, I suppose, if you want to share that link in the chat, that might be the best way to do it. So people can get that.
Yeah, and the other question about it being made locally at home, it takes a special piece of equipment. It goes through a process that it's not just charcoal. It's under high pressure and high heat, and it takes a special piece of equipment to make. And I'm assuming it's expensive. I haven't tried to buy one, but I would think it would be unlikely for someone at home to be able to make it themselves.
Okay, here is another question for Aaron. Do any of these regenerative farms, well, two questions that are related, work with the New York City Department of Environmental Protection's organics program? And do any of them use sludge from New York City Department of Environmental Protection?
Yeah, so these farms do not. Again, they're in Western New York. They're far away. So this is the one piece where I didn't really fit in with this audience because these farms aren't in the Hudson Valley. But a lot of farms are using these practices throughout the state. But the farms that I'm working with are not using those programs, no. And they're not, again, they're not, they have their own sources of manure. A lot of them have their own nutrient sources from manure. And so, yeah, they wouldn't even necessarily have a place to put the sludge even if they could get it. But based on their location alone, they're not really, they're not getting that.
Just a little sidebar. I used to know a dairy farmer in Orange County who took sludge/manure from Madison Square Garden when the circus was there and used it on his dairy farm.
Lyndsey, for CAD, does the river have to be the Hudson or can it be one of the Hudson tributaries?
Right now, we are focusing only on the Hudson riverfront, but maybe in the future.
Okay, good. And there's the Biochar Producer is in the Q&A if you can access that. Somebody's put that up, Mike Ruff, and a phone number. I did actually took a class once in creating biochar myself, and it wasn't high tech in the way that I was taught it, but it was. I'm not sure about the research behind it, Aaron, because it did seem like a bit of a process, and I didn't quite understand the difference myself. It seemed like you have to be slow burning the charcoal with air, and I don't know. It seemed a little daunting.
Yeah, I'm not an expert by any means. Maybe Jake could answer that. Yeah, it is a process for sure. And he said there that the unit is a 600K. So yeah, it's definitely some high tech stuff. It is under high pressure and at high temperatures. I'm not sure much more about that. There was another question about the Western New York farms taking sludge organics from, I think this is Department of Environmental Protection. So no, they're not. Like I said, most of them are getting all the nutrients that they need from local dairies, or they are dairies themselves. And yeah, I mean, it's just, yeah, it's very rare to have a farm that size in that area to take that sort of thing. So yeah, they have other cheaper, more readily available sources that they're going to go to first.
Lyndsey, here's a question for you. Could you talk a little bit about marsh migration? What is it and how could a community plan for that?
So within our CAD program, the students include the concept of marsh migration within their design. So in some areas, it is possible to allow space for the marsh to migrate and further expand. In other areas, it's not. So we included as a part of our CAD designs. How communities can plan for it, I'm not sure that I can answer that directly because I don't specialize in marsh migration, but we do have a few people on our staff who could answer that question for you if you want me to connect you to them.
Yeah, I'm not sure what is marsh migration?
So marsh migration is the idea that marshes can grow and expand if they are allowed the room to grow and expand. And in other areas, they can be hindered if there is not enough room or if there's overdevelopment.
Okay. So they move. Great.
They can.
Here's a comment about the climate. I guess somebody did the Climate Smart program, Ira Gershenhorn, and he's was involved in it in some way, and he says he finds it weird. The assumption of the program is that the status quo is all right. Many of the communities that get certified because they electrified are so far away from everything, they symbolize sprawl, and by certifying them, you are enabling sprawl. You have any sort of a challenge to the Climate Smart program? What do you say there?
I would say to that comment, many of the communities are certified because they electrified so far away from everything. There are many different actions that communities can take within the program. So the area that I talked about today was just focused on adaptation and resilience actions, but there are a number of different actions that communities can take. And there are some maybe unintended effects of different actions that communities don't anticipate. But I would say, check out more of the actions that we have, and there is likely something within your community that you can do that would have a positive effect.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, there's sort of the idea that doing something is better than doing nothing. Isn't that right? Have any estimates been done to assess how far nature-based solutions can take us toward reversing climate change? This is a big question for anybody. I'm guessing nobody.
Aaron, I thought some of your slides might have addressed that. The analysis of the outcomes.
So I don't know. I don't really have a good answer, but Heather, I saw you take off mute. Were you going to answer?
I was actually going to ask you to repeat the question.
Oh,
Okay, so the question is, have there been any estimates done to assess how far nature-based solutions can take us toward reversing climate change? It makes me think of the drawdown theory. So I don't know. Does anyone have an idea?
Well, I'm no expert on this, but adaptation and mitigation is one thing, but it has to balance out what's being emitted. So I would assume that any study that looked at the results overall on the planet of nature-based solutions would have to have some kind of projections of what's going to be emitted, which makes it a challenging formula
To estimate.
figure out.
and go ahead, Lyndsey, please.
Oh, I was just going to say, I would add to that, there is a lot of research on the effectiveness of nature-based solutions. I'm going to send one article in the chat about understanding the limits and value of nature-based solutions.
Oh, great.
I was going to just add, I know that Peter Woodbury and Jennifer Whiteman at Cornell University have also done a lot of model running and analysis, and they've had some reports. I don't have any links for you, but the names are Peter Woodbury and Jennifer Whiteman. So if you type that in at Cornell and, climate solutions, something like that, you will find some of their work.
It's a couple of questions for you, Erin. One is, how do farms join the program? Do they reach out or do you recruit? Is the first question.
Okay, I can answer that. Oh, sorry, quickly. Yeah, so this is all soft funding. We we wrote competitive grants to get funding to have this approach to outreach and education. And so we have a limited amount of funds, and therefore we did recruit the farms. And so as we add them, we do look into different types of farms that are going to better fill. So we are looking now towards smaller farms. If you want to be a part of the network, you could reach out to me and we can make a determination depending on the location and some other factors. But yeah, we have to recruit them just because we just have limited funds available to us and certain deliverables to meet those goals for funding.
Another question, can you briefly describe the nutrient injection? Is it feasible large scale?
Yeah, so the manure injector is just a piece of farm equipment that takes manure and it inserts it in a little slot right into the soil, and then it gets covered after that. And so in terms of large scale, I mean, just any farm that can afford a piece of equipment and be trained and to do it can use it. And they also have to have access to manure. So not all farms are dairies, and not all farms are close to dairies to use it. So anytime you're injecting, that manure has to be transported across roads, public roads, and there's emissions to those trucks, and so there's but that manure is going to get transported regardless. But the injection is yeah, it can be done on a larger scale, but it's going to be done field by field, farm by farm. There's not like a massive spaceship that can come down and do it all on a big scale.
Darn. Lyndsey, can you tell us where water reuse is happening?
I'm not sure what the question means. Can someone please clarify?
Okay, if someone could clarify that. In the meantime, someone is asking, I have a marsh on my land. I thought I might make a small pond at the lower end of the marsh where a stream comes out. Is this a good or bad idea for the flora and fauna in the marsh?
I won't be able to answer that question directly. I can refer you to some of our staff at the Hudson River National Estuary and Research Reserve, which we call HRNR for short. And I'm not sure that they will definitely be able to answer your question since it's so specific to the land and property that you're on, but they might be able to point you in the right direction or give you a bit more understanding because they have some specialists on marsh migration.
Someone else is asking, Lyndsey, the permeable surfaces that you spoke about, he's wondering if it's being adopted. He's saying in New York City Parks is fairly obstinate in favor of asphalt.
I won't be able to share much about New York City because that's sort of at the very far end of our region. I can share a link that will explain a bit more about some of the green infrastructure projects that are happening in the Hudson Valley, and I could try to find one for you specifically related to New York City.
Also, folks, we'll put up all these links on our website after the webinar in the next couple of days.
I think that we are coming to the end of the questions here.
All right. Is that it?
I believe that's it. And if somebody has a really burning question, put it in real quick. Otherwise, I think we are.
Okay.
Oh, one more
Right.
for Lyndsey. Urban forests. Last one. Did you hear it?
What is the question here?
Sounds like somebody wants to know about urban forests. Have anything to share with us about that?
I don't have information that I can share with you about that at this time. In the Hudson Valley, I'm not aware of projects related to the work that we do that are on urban forests.
Yes, and to this last question, we will have this recording on our website so you can share the recording.
Okay. All right. That was really good. I'm so glad we had plenty of time for the Q&A. And thanks to 3 speakers for doing a really good job and squeezing in a lot that you had to say and might have had to say in such a short period of time. I'm sure, Aaron, you could have spoke all night. So thanks. All right, so we, Mohawk Consultations, will be sending out an evaluation of this program in the near future, and it would be real helpful if you could please respond with your thoughts. It'll be a brief eval. Please check out our website, mohawk-consultations.org, where you will be able to see an upload of the webinar, find out what events we have coming up, such as one on universal basic income, as well as our annual Distinguished Achievement Award. And you can also find and like us on Facebook. So this year, our annual Achievement Award will be going to Yuko Yamamoto. Yuko has been the founder and director of the Bon Odori Dance Festival for Peace, holding the annual event in Kingston in order to commemorate the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, in order to amplify the voices of the survivors and to raise awareness of the risk of radiation effects caused by nuclear weapons and meltdowns of power plants such as Fukushima and Chernobyl. And you could tell how big an issue that is these days, considering what's happening in Ukraine at the Chernobyl power plant. So Yuko is one of those rare and valuable connectors in our community, a doer of good works, an activist for peace, a promoter of cultural understanding, and I'm told just simply extremely kind. So that'll be Sunday, June 5th at the Mountain House in person, and more info will be available soon on our website. And that is just about it. If you're motivated and able, your donation will greatly assist us in being able to produce our programs. You can donate on our website if you're so inclined. Thanks a lot, folks. Thanks so much to you 3 speakers, and thanks to my colleagues, Louisa and Kara and Kim. And see you at the next program. And please keep up your good work, whatever you're doing. Thanks, folks.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.